tax the rich, take all their assets, take all their wealth, and distribute it out to everybody else. That's what they're saying. Not sure I agree. Popular one at the minute. Everybody hates the rich. Everybody hates the white people, and everybody hates white rich people even more. Don't know how we've landed ourselves in this sort of demonic state of being white and rich, because God forbid you are both, then you are public enemy number one. And unfortunately, again, a lot of this comes from a place of jealousy. It comes from a place of lack of understanding and just a general lack of common sense, to be honest, for most people. Because we, in the UK, have just had a bit of a landslide election recently last year, where Labour government took control of the country. Woo. And what a great job they've done.
I want to work for Rachel Reeves, actually.
There you go. I think in the last 12 months, they have managed to piss off everyone. And they are, hilariously, they are a party for the working people. And I think even the working people have come to realise that they are just a party of prats. Because
I was going to use the other P word, pricks.
Yeah, both all apply. They have pissed off everyone. And it's a sad reality where now we have got such a bad government on both sides of what was the traditional UK leading political parties in the Conservatives and the Labour Party, falling by the wayside and absolutely crumbling through their own stupidity and their own bad policy, that lifelong voters of both parties have now looked elsewhere to allow for even the likes of a Zach Polanski to come in.
Hey, Green Party.
And now obviously the surging Reform Party with Nigel Farage, because everybody is getting sick and tired of their lives seemingly getting worse through no change to their own input. So what people are now starting to notice is that input is remaining the same. They're working the same jobs with the same hours, sometimes more hours, and their output is getting less and less and less. And for the uninformed, that just immediately then sort of casts this question as to why, and everybody wants to know why. But the first logical somehow answer for these people, or for a lot of people, is that it is the fault of the rich. And it is the rich people that have accumulated so much wealth now that it has become uncontrollable for them, and it is now having an effect on their livelihoods. Now, obviously, we'll deep dive a lot of this today. And the reality is there is an element of truth to that, because obviously it's, again, sometimes can be described, and the way it was always easiestly sort of put to me was almost like a big game of Monopoly, right? If you have the controlling assets on the board and you control the most expensive assets with all the hotels, all the utilities, and people land on your properties, people are paying through they're paying through their nose and mouth just to actually get to foot your bill, because you've got all the assets. And then they're having to sell their assets to be able to fund your actual growing monopoly of control. And that can get out of hand. So we've got to look at that side of things. But this blanket statement of tax the rich is one that comes from a place of just clear misunderstanding and a poor lack of knowledge on the actual subject themselves. Because what they don't understand is that already in the UK, the top 1% of earners generates 30% of the tax revenue in the UK. And in the US, that's 40%. So the top 1% generate 40% of the revenue. And if those people were to be removed or taxed more heavily, they would look to remove themselves. And trust me, when they leave, that burden does not become eliminated. It then falls onto the people further down the economic ladder to foot the bill, because the cost is still there. and the requirement for that money and that revenue is still there. In fact, it continues to go up and up and up. But it just means that working people are now going to be more responsible for paying it.
And as well, it's not like that single rich person, say it was just one that left, uses the NHS, funny enough. So, they'll have private healthcare. So when one person leaves and that amount of money is then hoovered out of the system, that amount of money is paying for the NHS for probably hundreds of thousands of people. So when you look at it like that, you've got one person is paying essentially for, I don't know, call it minimum 100, 200,000 odd people to go to the NHS for all their appointments. So, one person, I know what people say about properties, but one rich person doesn't tend to have tens of thousands of properties across the UK or other countries. They might have a few, they might have 10, they might have a fair few, but, there's a fair few properties around the world and, it's not going to really hoover up too much of the supply. But I think as well, drilling down to taxing the rich. Now, I try and look at it where I think, well, what is rich? And people look at it as money. But realistically, money is just there to facilitate a transaction. So, back hundreds of years, thousands of years ago, people would have been using cows or gold or things like that. And people have got it in their head that money is something that really it's not. It's just people have bought things from these rich people like Amazon. So anyone who's transacted on Amazon is helping the rich people of Amazon make more money because they're using the services that they're selling, which they're voluntarily paying for.
Giving them more cows.
Giving them more cows.
Us again. We're still here. That subscribe button is feeling awfully lonely. Give it a click.
And the like.
And it is a sad that now we're getting into sort of the economics of it, but sticking to the point of the fact that 1% paying for so much of the actual general population. And this is why we shouldn't necessarily just immediately vilify them, because the top 1% generally have earned their money through business and through beginning a business, starting a business, or inheriting a business, or buying a business and growing and scaling it to a place where they now have a disproportionate level of wealth. Now, again, that isn't just accrued through espionage, corporate espionage, or through lying or stealing or through theft. It's accrued through having a business or creating or coming up with an idea that helps a immediate vast number of people that will then buy into that business. Because if I went into a business and said, right, I'm going to start a new business, we've got water on the table, I'm going to go and get pond water and I'm going to bottle it, I'm going to sell it for a tenner, can't drink it, it's poisonous, but I want everybody to buy and drink it. People can go, that's the worst business idea I've ever heard. Health and safety will be on you. You're going to kill people. And why would anybody want to drink swampy pond water unless it's Shrek? So not happening. So I've got a market of one, Shrek, who might fund him a few little swampy waters. But straight away, that business is going to fail. It's not going to make any money. It's not going to make me a millionaire or a billionaire. So again, that becomes, using layman's terms, at least then hope these people that say tax the rich, that they understand that for me to become rich, there does have to be some value created because I have to earn that money. Now, then they say the argument always on these people is always, well, they've never done it on their own and they have a team of people working for them. Great, I agree. So that's always...
It's called a job.
It's called a job. And guess what? Those jobs are created by the top 1%. Guess who they then pay? So not only are they footing the actual bill for the tax, they're also employing people, which allow them to have a level of life and well-being because they've created a business that creates value, which they can then employ people. But again, they say, well, if people come in to do the job and work for the business, should they just have, if I went to go and work for Apple selling phones in the Birmingham branch, should I earn the same as Tim Cook? Is that
Should do, yeah.
according to their logic, that's how it should work? And it's like, well, no, because we have to have a proper apportionment of value. If I bring an X amount of value into the business, I deserve, a fair proportion back. But if I'm just selling a few phones and helping with tech support, there has to be a fair economic value given to that role. Again, playing devil's advocate, does that always happen? No, there's bad management. There are people that look to exploit workers, absolutely. But in the whole, the people that have the top 1%, they have risked everything, invested their literal every asset that they have, their time, every second, minute, hour of the day. Where if you look at someone like Elon Musk, who has spent years and years and years sleeping with no home under his desk, spending 16 hours a day at work for 10 years straight, coming up with ideas, implementing them and creating value. How many people on planet Earth would be happy to work 16 hours a day flat out with no distraction, no break, not sleeping at home because they don't have one, sleeping under their desk with a pillow and a rug for 10 years, and then say, well, he doesn't deserve it because he's exploited people? I was like, well, the only person who's really exploited is himself. And that's why he's in the position he's in, because he's a good leader and he's created that wealth.
On that as well, with because I've read his, and I think you have as well, but with his book, one of his sons who transitioned, she hated him because she'd been, encapsulated in this mindset. And to try and make her feel better, he sold all his assets, he sold all his houses, he pretty much didn't own anything, he rented. He was like, I want to prove to you that, I'm not this evil capitalist person. Like, it's just, I'll prove. And he even did that. He's even gone that far with it and didn't even have a house at one point.
I'm assuming she still don't like him.
Nah, of course not. She's changing her last name.
Don't. Respect. Look, you can please some of the people some of the time. You're never going to please all the people all the time. And the reality is you're always going to upset some people. But this blanket statement of tax the rich just doesn't work. And again, in a truly sort of socialistic society, one of the other facts that we can sort of pay attention to is if we were to take every single asset in the world and we were to distribute it evenly, everybody would end up with around $50,000, which...
Ooh.
Again, not only would the economy and the entire marketplace collapse, because if you are, and the thing that you have to remember, that's based off of asset value. If you were to take just cash, readily available cash, you would be looking at around 15,000 for every person, which means that additional 35K is the balance of assets and shows the leverage that actually most people's wealth isn't tied into cash in a bank. It's tied into the value of a business that they are aligned with. So staying with Elon Musk, Tesla isn't valuable solely because of the business itself. It's because of Elon at the helm, who is leading it, growing it, nurturing it, and the value that he brings to Tesla. If you were to take Joe Bloggs off the street and say, right, Elon, get off. Joe Bloggs has had an idea. You're leading it. The value of Tesla would plummet. It would absolutely nosedive and it would become worthless because the business would eventually, if it was to be solely ran by Joe Bloggs, who's got no business experience, it would fail.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at it back in history when Steve Jobs passed away and the price of Apple stock crashed. And it took a long time to build confidence back up to, Tim Cook, but he's managed to nurture, learn from Steve and have his own spin on it. And obviously he's still one of the most valuable companies in the world, but it takes a lot of effort to get there. And as you say, if you just got some random person off the street, Apple would cease to exist.
And it goes back to that point that rich requires resistance and rich requires pain, pressure, and sacrifice from people. And the biggest one, and this is where I always get my back up on this one actually, is sports stars, certainly soccer, football players, just for our American audience. Also, and again, going over to America and using, that's why I've said it, like a basketball, huge pay, American football, huge pay, NBA, huge pay. All these people are making fortunes. But keeping it closer to home, back to football, it's like if you are in the Premier League, you are in the top 1% of the 1%. And to get there in a sport so highly contested as football, then imagine the level of sacrifice and the level of difficulty that it would be to make your way into the Premier League. Of all of the kids that grow up around Europe, certainly, and South America that say, I want to be a footballer, it's like every kid's dream. So you're competing against pretty much every kid in this area. Like, you know, so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions that you're competing against to have this dream. So there's your first level of competition. It's like Mr. Beast Squid Games, and you can see straight away when you're competing against another, was it 1,000 people?
Something like that.
To compete for a grand prize. But it's like Premier League is like competing against tens upon tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of children who all have the same idea and want to win the prize of joining the Premier League. So that involves non-stop training, sacrifice, dieting, not going out with your friends, not having friends, not being able to do all of the things that you would normally do as a kid, losing your entire childhood to eventually, hopefully, one day have a shot at joining the Premier League and still may not even make it because of an injury, because of a sport. So they do get an obscene amount of money. But that's because 99.99% of other people weren't willing to put the work in to get there. And not only do they make the obscene money once they're there, they're also, I go back to this term, generating value. And that is the main thing that people that haven't got the money or constantly say tax the rich don't understand, is that they should be looking at creating value, not where's my money or take his money off him and give it to me, because they would just lose it and spend it and give it back to the rich person because they own companies and they own the value. They own the Apple, they own the Amazon, they own the Starbucks, they own the Netflix. They will just completely 180 the money straight back to them because they don't create any value. They just spend.
Yeah, and this is the difference between the rich and the poor, is that the rich own assets and the poor own money. And it's like, you know, money gets devalued, properties increase relative to that money. So it's, you know, it's no wonder that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. You know, Donald Trump had maybe a good idea, and this is what I like. He's out of the box thinking that any born citizen, I think it was about $1,000 they'd put into an account which automatically gets invested. And by the time they reach, you know, whatever age, you know, it's grown into, you know, a substantial amount of money. And those sorts of ideas which kind of force people to get into a bit of investing, it's good because that will, like the rich, increase their value rather than just sticking to money.
Well, like you said, and you can actively invest in these companies and you can spend your money rather than spending money in the shops that these big billionaires, millionaires own and say tax the rich. You know, they say tax the rich whilst wearing Nike trainers. And I'm like, what are you on about?
Burberry scarf.
And like, you sat there wearing designer stuff, and I bet you went to a supermarket this morning to buy your shop rather than the local farm, like the local farm shop. And I bet you don't buy locally sourced, and I bet you don't care about this. And for the justice warriors out there that say, oh, well, I do, like, you're part of the 1% of the 1%, if that. So the reality is, it's easy again to be virtuous and say tax the rich. Now, obviously, I think for me, to solve this problem, we need to have a big shift in the education of money literacy, financial literacy, business, understanding, creating value, which is the most important thing that we can possibly teach people, is how to create value. The more people in society that we have creating real life, real helpful value for others, the better we will be as a society, and the more we will grow, the quicker we'll grow. Because the reality is, without the likes of Steve Jobs and let's say Steve Wozniak and whoever else, the smartphone, the Apple phone just doesn't exist. Without the likes of Walt Disney, Disney just does not exist, and his brother. You can't just say, well, oh, if they didn't do it, somebody else would have come along. No, they were the creators and founders of that entire genre, putting cartoons and animated films together with music and all the singing and dancing that it's now turned into. I've got to love a Disney film. Aria in particular is a big fan of Moana.
There you go. But then you even look at then fast food, which is then cheap, which does help people. Granted, there's obviously the side effect of it not being healthy, but McDonald's, without Ray Kroc, that would never have happened, and that helps save people money long term because they've created something that's efficient and that it works.
Exactly. So not only do they add to society by adding huge value and creating businesses and creating inventions and health care products and new drugs and new, just so many different things that are coming out consistently, like with self-driving cars or the rocket technology that he's doing, or Neuralink that's helping people with degenerative disease and blindness and issues, and then healthcare trends that's also moving. We're going to have probably cures for XYZ coming out any minute, and all these things don't just happen. Society doesn't just develop, and we don't just progress into the next stage of evolution. It takes key members of society or key individuals who work and put the effort in, and then our advice, or these, not ours, but certain people's advice is, well, I know they've put a lot of effort in and I know they've done a lot of good for society, but tax them, take it off them. They don't deserve it. I deserve it. Well, what have you done? Well, I work my 40-hour week, and when I'm there, I don't really care about the results that I'm getting. That's not my fault. It's theirs, because, I'm not being incentivized. They don't pay me enough. So they need to pay me more, and then I'll work harder. And this comes from somebody that employs people. Trust me, we've seen it. Money is not the incentive for all people, or for most people, actually, to be fair.
Well, the thing is as well, I always think, taxing the rich, and then go for what? Well, because they want to distribute the money, but you're relying on a government to then distribute the money. Now, how many times over the years have we heard about people moaning about wanting the extra money and they need this and we need taxes to help so-and-so? When has the government really ever followed through? What do they think is going to happen? Like that, we're all going to increase these taxes and then they'll pigeonhole all this money for all these people that are, need it specifically for them. It's like, don't worry, we're going to take that exact tax revenue, every penny of it is all going to get put in this little box, and that little box is all going to get distributed to everyone that needs it. It's just asinine. It's just not going to be something that ever is going to happen. They end up squandering it on a load of random crap like HS2, and the money's gone, and it's gone.
Well, this buys into my next point, and probably my final point, is that genuinely, I would say that most people are happy to pay taxes, and the rich people are happy to pay their taxes, but they are also massively efficient. They understand wealth creation and value creation. And so the rub for them would be that I'm so annoyed that I have to give such a large percentage of my wealth away to people that misuse it. And one of the biggest things that I think that we could do, or somebody could do in the government, would be to actually give some form of reporting or feedback away from just general budgets and sort of tax spend was an overall, where we can see X many 100 billion spent on welfare, etc. Where me, almost as an individual taxpayer, can see that and again, we talk about how as a society, or just as generally humans, we care deeply about, let's say, the society closest to home. So we care obviously about our family first and friends, then we care about our local communities, then maybe our city, and then it starts to get to beyond that, and we kind of like, well, yeah, not interested what happens there. We want obviously everybody to be happy and prosperous, but beyond that, we kind of really close proximity, we care more, right? So if I could see, or the rich people could see, or everybody could see where their money was going, like, for example, imagine if you got a letter through the post and said, thanks for your donation of tax this week or this month. Your donation has helped fill 8 potholes in your local council and has also helped contribute towards the saving of X person's life through treatment at the NHS. You'd be there going like,
Oh yeah,
wow, like I've made a difference. But instead, it gets spent on things that you don't know, don't care about, and find yourself really just pulling this constant battle of, well, I know I've got to pay tax and do my part, but also it's being wasted by a bunch of twats in suits.
Yeah, condoms in Nigeria and things like that. Do you remember that with Trump and Doge and all that shite was coming out?
I do. They did like, was it LGBT training for certain cultures
Kangaroos,
and backgrounds. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like when you realise that this waste is happening, you become less inclined to want to part with your wealth because you think, well, why would I give it to you? I've worked so hard to build this and to create this wealth for myself. So I now need to give it away to someone who doesn't work as hard, isn't bothered, and by all accounts is going to waste it and spend it on crap that they don't need just because I've worked hard to achieve it and they don't want to work as hard and do the same. And so I can see why the rich are they're starting to leave. And the reality is, like I said, when the rich leave and businesses fail and all of a sudden they set up in other countries, then those other countries will start to develop quicker than ours. We will go into a state of decline. The working people will be left to foot the bill, which means that more people end up in poverty. And that's proven by the most recent budget where Rachel Reeves has put in the stealth tax by maintaining the tax thresholds, where, put simply, obviously as inflation occurs year in year, the value of our money goes down. So £40,000 now is not the same as £40,000 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So that means that the tax threshold should go up in line with inflation, but she just froze it for another 3 years, which means
Good old Rachel from accounts.
Which means once again, the working people will be left to foot the bill when the rich people decide that they've had enough and they're going to leave and go to a country where they've got more respect, they've got a clear indication of the tax being used well and actually offering something of value in return. And that is unfortunately where we're at with the whole issue of taxing the rich. So
yeah, but at least benefits have gone up. So that's a plus.
At least benefits have gone up.
Everyone's happy. 50 kids now and I'll get more money than flipping anyone.
Well, that goes back to the point of incentive, because it's like once the incentive has been taken away, you've got then a new generation of youths coming through and potential new aspiring and budding entrepreneurs. And we look at someone from our generation, Gymshark, Ben and Lewis. What an incredible story they've got. And people then, it gets to the point where they just think to themselves, oh, what's the point? Because
somewhere else.
Why would I start a business and go through all this turmoil? Imagine if you got to the Premier League and they said, well, it's an even pay amongst all leagues in football. So again, and I'm not going to get into the whole women in sport argument. Let's just keep it in the Premier League and the championships. But if the same players if the people got paid the same, whether you're playing for, Accrington Stanley or you're playing for Manchester United, and it's just fair across the board, why would anybody that's got to a level past League 2 football,
Sunday League,
try to get any better? Because what's the point? Well, there's no point in me trying to push to land myself in the Premier League.
Potentially injure yourself, lose the pay.
I'm not going to get any more money for it. There's no benefit for me to doing that. If the same thing applies with business, well, why would I start a business and try and create this new product or this new service that's going to help thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people? And this product is going to be a new invention, whether it's this new VR or augmented reality or ChatGPT, which is helping save lives. Why should I bother with artificial intelligence? Because I'm not going to get any benefit from it if I just have to give everything away. There's got to be incentive. And that's the other thing they fail to realise, is that if they take the incentive away, again, development within countries and within human society or civilization as a whole just falls off.
Yeah. Disgrace.
Disgrace. Tax the rich.
Tax the rich, that's what I reckon.
Tax the rich. No, it's one of those things. It's a sad reality because we're caught between a rock and a hard place where genuinely I understand that people are struggling with the current cost of living and they want to try and find an enemy to blame. And yes, without a doubt, there are people out there with more than their fair share, and absolutely there is no need for anybody in this world to have billions and billions and billions of pounds or dollars in a bank account when there is suffering going on. But at the same time, society wouldn't work if we didn't allow for incentivization and capitalism to take place. We've tried to look for other models. Capitalism is the best that we have been able to find to allow for the most amount of people to have a fair shot at finding riches. Remember, it's all about value creation. It's all about doing your bit to help the society around you to grow and flourish. So if you haven't already started, hit subscribe on the button. We'll help you get there, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.